Sorry guys, I don't know what's happening. I mean, anyways, it's almost midnight, so I'm just gonna shut down the stream, and I'm gonna keep working on this, and you know, we'll resume next week on Wednesday. Sorry, on Monday as usual. So those of you who are here, hey XMX Studio. No, I'm not on Wi-Fi. Now this is a broadband. You know, usually 30 megabits per second. I've never had any issues streaming. I've had a couple of weird disconnects tonight. And I'm looking here. Everything looks normal on my machine. Super weird. Yeah, OBS is going a little nuts. I could try to just run it again, just for a few more minutes. But if it disconnects again, I think I'm gonna just call it quits anyway, because it's getting late. But like I said, I'll be continuing to stream on this next Monday as usual. So let's just see if it holds out for a few more minutes while I try to put back the what we used to have here. Okay, it seems to be holding out a bit right now. I wonder if it's because my CPU is like close to 100. It's very possible. And maybe what's happening is OBS can't keep up. Let me see, what's taking up all my CPU? Camera frame server? Well, nothing's really standing out right now, but let's just see. XMX Studio is asking if I'm downscaling 4K. No, this is native 1080p. Well, I mean, actually it's not native, but what is it again? Yeah, so my monitors are 1920 by 1200, and that's being scaled. So it's close to 1080. Honestly, I've never had any issue before, so it's a bit strange. Now Visual Studio is going nuts. Yeah, Dell 24-inch. Benjamin. So Benjamin's asking, I was rendering to texture before, why did I switch? So basically what I was doing is I would render to a texture, and then I would take that texture and use a fragment shader to darken it. And that worked, you know, and it looked fine. But what I didn't like about it was that I could never do a full render from scratch of my scene, you know? I always had to kind of rely on what was rendered in the past, which meant that, for example, if I want to do my blur effect, I could blur, and then I want to redraw the lines on top, the original lines. But the problem is I can only draw the batch of lines I've gotten for this delta time. And all the lines from before that have been darkened in that other texture, I can't just redraw them. So the only way I could get away with that is if I basically sample the texture that contains, you know, all the lines I've ever drawn up until now, right? And like sample and look for which pixels are set, and then read those and write those on top of the blur texture. And that was where I was going to go, but I felt like that was maybe not very flexible. Plus, if I want to do things like use a thicker line for blur and a thinner line for non-blur, then I have to do more. I have to kind of like draw my scene twice, you know, and darken twice. And so I was like, that sounds like a bad idea. And so I thought, what if I just manage the full batch of lines that I'm supposed to be drawing from scratch, and do the darkening of the lines, like the brightness decay, all on the CPU side. So obviously I'm not taking advantage of you know, fragment shaders doing it for me on a per pixel level, but it's okay, right? I thought I could manage it on the CPU side. I should be able to. And that's where I'm at now, right? And what bothers me is not the performance. Like right now my performance is fine. What bothers me is I cannot get it to not flicker. And in a way, I guess I kind of understand why it's doing that, now that I think about it. It's like I get it, but I don't get why it was working fine in the fragment shader. So here's what I think I get. The way it works right now is that you know, like a game, I'm doing it time-based, right? So I have a single thread that does everything, and I try to perform everything as quickly as possible, where I compute a delta time from the last frame, and that amount of time from last frame, that's my frame time, my slice of time I'm allowed to update my emulator. So with that, I tell the CPU, go ahead and execute as many instructions as can fit within this number of, you know, like as many instructions that you can execute normally for this delta time, for this frame time. And then I go to my, you know, graphics chip, which is called the VIA for the Vectrex, and I say, you go ahead and advance or update for that amount of time as well. And so what that means in terms of the Vectrex is that the vector beam will, let's say it's drawing a line, it will, let's say it has a really long line to draw, but it only has, let's say, a small delta time, it'll basically draw a small tiny line segment along this bigger line. And that tiny line segment is the thing that gets added to the list of lines to draw. Now if we do this over multiple frames, you can imagine many, many lines being added to this buffer, and each one of them starts off with a brightness of 1 right now. And what I believe what I'm seeing is that, and this is my intuition about the fact that it's kind of flickering, and like the fact that when I hit pause and unpause, you can see like the ship kind of here's a good example. If I open this, in paint.net again. Oh, not Paint 3D. Too many programs called Paint. See this, right? So this looks like basically I drew this line and then this line and then darkened it by some delta time, and then we drew these lines afterwards, right? So my intuition is telling me that's the problem. The problem is I'm drawing these line segments with times, and I'm darkening them, and then drawing another line and then darkening them, you know? So that is probably where things are wrong. But then effectively I was doing the same thing when I was just drawing to a texture, and then the fragment shader would darken them, you know? So why is this different? My guess is that actually the GPU is running the fragment shader at a certain frame rate, right? I think, I don't know, you know, and maybe what's happening is that I'm now doing this darkening per line I draw, let's say, or per batch of lines, whereas the GPU would just do it like periodically and darken the whole thing periodically. You know, maybe based on VSync or something. Honestly, I don't know. It doesn't make that much sense to me. Benjamin says, thanks for explaining. Seems like you should be able to make it work on GPU. No, I know. I should. I did. But like I said, I'm probably going to go back to that solution, but it means that I have to probably draw into two separate buffers if I want to have thicker lines for blurring and thinner lines for the overlay. Benjamin asks, it would only darken during the full screen render, right? Full screen quad render. Yes, that's correct. But see that, the full screen quad render, the draw call that I would send, I would be sending that like every frame. You know, so as fast as I could run. So if I'm running at 400 frames per second, every one of those frames, I'm making a draw call for whatever, you know, few line segments I may have gotten in that frame. So let's say like at 400 frames per second, I'm drawing at about 100 line segments. So I draw 100 line segments into the texture, and into a texture where, let's say the very first time I draw 100 line segments, and then that texture gets darkened into another one. Next frame, I swap, and then I draw new lines on top of the one that has old lines in it. Let's say another 100, and then this gets darkened into the other texture, and then we draw this, and then we swap, and then I keep doing this, and basically I'm always overdrawing on a texture that has old lines, and that's being darkened to black to kind of simulate a CRT. So by all measures, what I'm doing should result in the same thing. Unless I'm just doing something wrong. Which is entirely possible. You know what? Let me check something here. I guess I don't need to do this. I wonder if this is causing me problems. It shouldn't, because there's no feedback and I clear it. Yeah, no, this shouldn't make a difference. No, it's still flickery. Yeah, no, that makes no difference. What I should do is I should take a capture and see what it looks like in RenderDoc. That might give me an idea of what's going on. Okay, let's see if we can see something. No, there's nothing to see. It's really the same thing. You see for the geometry. Oh, maybe not wireframe. Why does it say unbound here? Is it because I'm clearing the depth here? And I don't have a depth buffer? I think that's what's going on here. I should stop soon, guys. Ugh, it's getting late. Like, why isn't this showing me a clear? We bind a frame buffer and a clear. Unbound. Bind frame buffer, and then I don't do a bind buffer. But that's okay. Bind the frame buffer here. It says unbound here. It's really strange. And here it says current output cur rendered texture 0. Now what's this clear here? Also unbound. Benjamin says, have you seen docs.gl? I have not. Oh wow. This is indeed quite nice. It even puts tutorials and everything. That's kind of cool. Thanks for the link, man. Appreciate it. $12.82. Invalid operation. Interestingly, this doc for GL3 is not showing me. Am I looking at the wrong thing? It's just available in those. The other doc here actually said invalid operation is generated if clear is executed between the execution begin and corresponding end. 1282 there, yeah. 502 is invalid operation. Which would seem to make sense given that we're getting the unbound buffer thing in RenderDoc. Now it's 1280, which is 500. Invalid enum. What? Oh, and now it's 1282. So we're back to that. Do I need to use clear frame buffer? I don't think I ever called gel draw buffers, which is probably why this doesn't work. Oh no, here it is. Oh yeah, that's right. And I do it once for G texture FB up here. With color attachment 0. So this is all set up properly. Benjamin says, yeah, but GL begin end is old. Shouldn't be using that. I'm not using it. Which is why that error doesn't match up with what the doc says. What I don't get is that what's being implied here is that you can call GL clear and it'll just clear all the buffers for the currently active frame buffer, right? Maybe it's because I need to clear it once the texture is bound. Yeah, that would make sense. Oh, but I did bind it. Right there. So that's what I was doing before, see? Bind the frame buffer texture 2D. Okay, I'm doing frame buffer texture, but that should be fine. Yeah, sure. Gel clear, gel color buffer bit. I mean, this should work, right? Is that a clear error? I don't know. Of 82. Now I get 0. So this is the invalid operation apparently? curious if that unbound thing disappears now, which would make no sense to me, but anyway. Nope, still unbound. This is why I don't like OpenGL. I really should be able to do it this way. I have no idea how to use this function. In any case, I don't think this is actually my problem, so. It's true that my buffer is a floating point buffer, so maybe FV is what's required. Even my clear buffer is unbound apparently. So there is like something here that's not quite right. Could it be this? Bind the frame buffer. Set the frame buffer texture. I wonder if I ever need to bind this frame buffer here. Oh, lost all my settings. Didn't even realize I closed it. Nope. Did I close render dock again? Jeez. Why am I doing that? I don't even realize it. So Benjamin says, did you try running with API validation? How do you run with API validation? That sounds extremely useful. I'm definitely not clearing my texture, you know what I mean? Benjamin says there's a flag. It's in core 4.3 though. Oh, you mean in here? Enable API validation. And do you just need to do a capture to see what it does? Cool. So that pretty much corresponds to what we're seeing. The clear buffer parameter has invalid enum. Okay, well, alright, so forget clear buffer. It looks like it's not complaining about my GL clear though, even though it seems to do nothing. Or maybe it is doing something, but it's just like, it doesn't tell me. Okay, why does it say unbound here? And what's this here? GL uniform one location as specified. Hey Benjamin, this is very useful. Thank you for pointing that out. Appreciate that. Well, you know, one way to know if it's actually doing something is if we don't call it, it behaves the same way. That's kind of interesting. Let me just do that. Okay, I gotta stop. It's getting late. You know how it is, you don't want to stop because it's bugging you because it's not making sense. Okay, that's the back buffer. There's like a weird bug in RenderDoc where when you click on a command that is apparently unbound or whatever, it doesn't, like, it changes the title here, but it doesn't change this here. So like if I click on this image here where it says GCRT texture and then click on clear color, for some reason now it's black, right? And it says GCRT texture. Let's say I click on this draw arrays where it says cur render texture 0 and then click on the GL clear, this image is still here. So that's some weird refresh issue which makes it difficult to know if what I'm looking at is valid. But the fact that, you know, here in the outputs I should be seeing a frame buffer object when I clear, it kind of bothers me. And the fact that not clearing seems to have made no effect on this texture. Super weird. The only place I'm drawing to is here. Benjamin says maybe the FPO unbound is RenderDoc bug too. Yeah, maybe. Could be. I'm kind of confused as to how not clearing can work here. All right, you know what? I'm gonna stop here, step away from this, mull over it a little bit, and maybe I'll have some ideas. Come back to it when I'm fresh. So thanks for watching, and hope to see you next Monday. Take care, guys.